Thank you, Rajesh, for the time, and thank you for this discussion. So, what more exciting time to have this conversation with you soon after the 56th GST Council meeting. This is the one of the most iconic and GST Council meetings of recent times. To recap, the Honorable Prime Minister on the Independence Day speech set the decks for all of us to look forward to the council meeting, saying there's going to be a Diwali dhamaka, but it turned out to be bigger than a Diwali dhamaka, and it turned out sooner, before Navratri itself. With that, I think staying focused on Nasscom, we will use this discussion to understand your take on the journey so far, some of your takeaways on the recent announcements, and what next, Rajesh.
No, thank you, Mahesh, for having me in this conversation. Look, I think, as you rightly said, it's a phenomenal step towards where we want to be, and we always worry about, ease of doing business for the companies, and a significant part of that would be around all the reforms, and tax becomes such a significant part of that. So, 8 years after its introduction, the GST stands as one of the sort of the most consequential reforms, as all of us know, in all of the independent India. And, and quite honestly, after the introduction, we haven't seen anything like what we had this time. Probably the most significant tax reform, if you may, since independence, and also resonates with the whole one nation, one tax, one market, which the Prime Minister and the FM has been mentioning. They actually represent, in many ways, not only a simplification of taxes, but also almost a milestone in India's institutional maturity in many ways. So for Nasscom, this is, as you know very well, Mahesh, we work with you very, very closely. GST is never an isolated story. It is actually part of a larger canvas of reforms across, for example, taxation, whether it is SEZ, startup ecosystems, labor frameworks, all of them. But taken together, these reforms are really shaping the operating environment. And I talked about ease of doing business. This is important for India's technology industry, making it a lot more competitive globally, more inclusive domestically as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But and how do you make sure that government becomes a trusted partner, so that it will help the industry in terms of serving our clients worldwide. The technology industry itself has, as you very quickly, it's a fairly large industry. For those of you who do not know, we're a $283 billion industry as of 24-25. We export roughly $224 billion, with also the domestic market, growing pretty well, and of course a relatively small market, $58 billion for us. Net hiring we have done during the last year alone is about 126,000. Total employment of 5.8 million, which is all good numbers for this. Now, of course, we're not even talking about the GCCs and the implication of what they do, the R&D companies, etc., etc. So this industry actually has got a broad portfolio of organizations which are actually doing business here. And, quite honestly, when you look at these numbers and our industry itself, two complementary stories in many ways. At one end, we have the export orientation, as we talked about, this large number of 224 billion. They require a little different type of treatment compared to the domestic market in many ways. So the domestic digital commerce is also enabling micro and small enterprises to reach new markets. So both are essential to the vision of Viksit Bharat. One brings in the foreign exchange, creates high-value employment, reinforces our reputation as a trusted global delivery hub. But on the other hand, how do you make sure that a tax system which is transparent, predictable? Quite honestly, I think that the certainty is what more than anything else so important for this industry, and of course very facilitative in nature. So GST, through the shared leadership of both the central government, the union, as well as the states, has precisely provided that backbone, Mahesh.
I think the corporate federalism is truly commendable, because all the decisions that have been made have always been unanimous, including the ones in the recent meeting. Two things that stuck in my head when you talked about ease of doing business, that in the third pillar, as it's called in the press release after the Honorable Prime Minister's speech, is ease of living, and we'll talk a little bit. And the second part that also resonated was almost 80% of the tech is export. So with that, those 2 points, I thought it's a good segue to to reflect on the council meeting, because all of us are reading and excited as consumers and pro common man about the rate reductions on the rates. But also there are so many things that have happened in this council meeting which are on these pillars of ease of living. I thought it good to just chat with you about two things, Rajesh. One, on the export front, the concept of intermediary is now a thing of past. The council has approved its deletion. Nasscom, who's been a knowledge partner and has been a engaging partner with the government for so many years, has been instrumental in requesting for this deletion. What's your take on that? Will that set the decks for more export? Is one question. And the second one is on the pillar of ease of living was one subset of registration and refunds. So refunds now, one will get a 90% refund in a pretty short time frame, and the balance after the authorities do their diligence. But on registration as well, we'll probably talk after your response, so that we'll confine it more on the export and the refund front, Rajesh.
No, totally agree, Mahesh. And as you rightly mentioned, this council meeting itself was a clear demonstration of how what we call cooperative federalism delivers results in many ways, right? So very happy about that. And then you mentioned about getting rid of the intermediary clause. I think this decision to restore a little bit of a clarity on the treatment of services delivered from India to overseas clients is a case in point, and of course that's what's a big aha there. And for years, as you know, you've been working with us for several years. There was so much of uncertainty over classification of what individual entities mean. This created a lot of disputes, as you know, blocked refunds and tied up working capital for companies. By confirming that such services will be treated as exports, the council has truly resolved a long-standing problem. So very thankful to that. Thankful to the finance minister and the government in many ways. This is aligning India with the global practice, right, and reinforces the trust, if you may, in our export regime for a sector that generates, as I said, more than $224 billion in exports annually. This is a big deal. This clarity is not just a tax technicality, but it's also a confidence-building measure in many ways for the global investors and client. And secondly, in some ways equally important was a decision, as you mentioned, to provide much simpler registration mechanism for small businesses selling through e-commerce platforms. That seems a big deal for us across multiple states. So until now, of course, as you know, the compliance burden of multiple registration acted as a barrier to the market entry, and the council's approval signals a strong commitment to inclusion. Of course, also lowers the barrier for entrepreneurs in smaller cities, enables, of course, more sellers to participate in national commerce. And of course, it's clearly an example of how these reforms support both growth and social equity in many ways. So that's one. The other point you mentioned is also around the refunds.
Sure.
Commitment to sort of release this 90% of refunds provisionally, of course, and of course eventually 100% in cases where the inverted duty structure, I think it's another significant decision. So companies facing working capital pressures, these reforms demonstrate responsiveness and of course practical support as well. So very glad. But one thing I want to mention, Mahesh, is that what is striking in this whole thing was not just the substance of these reforms, but the process that through which they were achieved in many ways. So through the very collective effort of both the union government in the central, as well as the constructive role of the states, and continuous engagement with the industry. And we represent the industry, technology industry in some sense. And I believe that Nasscom played a role in ensuring that the government understands what the industry is actually going through and getting the right help from the government. So couldn't be more pleased with the outcome than we are today.
But having said that, sticking to the Nasscom theme of what next and what can we do more, it's good to pause, reflect, and really be grateful, which we are with the GST Council and the central government and all state governments. But, building on what you said, that clarity on exports is paramount. And now with intermediary out of the way, almost 80-90% of a concern, because it was more a concern than a levy or many years of litigation going away. I do think there are a few parts on export which are still work in progress. But maybe your thoughts on what we should be expecting and what should we work towards as industry, and what is industry hoping for in the next wave of the next generation reforms, as has been called out by the Honorable Prime Minister.
So, Mahesh, to me, these decisions are milestones, right? But they're also signposts pointing to the future in many ways. So, when you look at the GST framework, this must continue to evolve. I mean, it's not a one-time thing that we have done and dusted, but it's also about continuing to evolve in some sense. This has to go hand in hand with the growth of the technology industry. Like oftentimes we find that the tax system sort of catches up and then still works on slightly, older set of rules and so on and so forth. I think the fact that they're now catching up with what is really going on in the industry is a huge plus for all of us. Let's start with a few things. First, of course, aligning GST with what we call global delivery models. In our Indian service providers, most of them, you will find that, especially the Indian service exporters, they increasingly operate through offshore on-site assignments and engagements. Some of the staff is on-site and most of the staff are going to be offshore, including they might be having branches overseas, ensuring consistency between GST and foreign exchange rules and the income tax treatment would certainly reduce uncertainty. It will also support predictability in many ways and reinforce India's attractiveness as a global delivery hub, because we need to constantly reinforce the fact that we are the best global delivery hub in technology sector in the world, and that actually this helps significantly. We need to continue to align these two. Second would be, if you ask me, maybe simplifying compliance at scale. So in technology sector, around 20 companies or so would account for nearly 80% of our export revenue. So these firms operate under multiple taxes, serve as anchors of employment and skill development for the nation at large, creating a pan-India compliance framework that, for example, consolidated filings, streamlined returns, pre-filled digital data, all of that would reduce duplication and allow resources to be channeled into innovation and job creation, because they should be less worried about ensuring that they are tax compliant and more worried about the fact that they're able to generate the business and then go forward. Third would be moving from a very reactive reform to a very proactive collaboration. I think we have seen some of that in the past, but over the past 8 years or so, the council has often issued clarifications in response to issues as they arose. The next phase would involve, if you may, co-designing compliance platforms, embedding facilitation for low-risk taxpayers, and offering advanced guidance for emerging business models such as AI is everywhere, deep tech, and so on and so forth. I think how do you make sure that we understand how these technologies work and how taxation in the context of these technologies should actually evolve in some sense. So, the technology industry is absolutely ready to be a partner in this journey, offering our own capabilities, industry's capabilities in data analytics, digital platforms, and AI. Of course, AI will play a big role in taxation as we move forward. So how do you make sure that we are able to strengthen the GST system itself? As these directions are very illustrative. They're not very exhaustive. So I haven't given all the stuff that we need to talk about, but nevertheless, I think it's the right direction. So very, very excited for the future and what we could achieve going forward as well, Mahesh.
Equally, if not more excited after hearing your thoughts. I think embracing new age businesses and our global delivery model seems to be key on one end, and the other end is to change and react to the compliance and ecosystem to make it more simpler. I'm not only hoping, but I'm very confident that that's going to happen, not in the medium to long term, but in the short term, given the track record and the bar that has been raised so high on what has been delivered to us by the council and the continued engagement. Lovely speaking with you, Rajesh. Sincerely appreciate your time, and thank you on behalf of the industry for the constant being the trusted voice of the tech and e-commerce and larger sector at large. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Mahesh, and I want to let you also know that Nasscom stands committed to this partnership, to supporting governments, both central and states, in every stage of the reforms journey, and to ensuring that India's technology industry continues to be an engine of growth, if you may, and inclusion, and of course ensuring that we bring in the right innovation to the country, and we're all set to sort of align ourselves in this fashion to make sure that we achieve the Viksit Bharat. So thank you so much for your partnership as well, Mahesh. Thank you.
Thank you again.